Yo, yo, yo. What is up, y'all? And welcome back to another edition of Rob's Best Bets. And in this episode, baby, we have got a fantastic one because we've got a bracket. As you can see right in front of me here, we have something to stare at. It's a 12-team playoff. We've been begging for this for years, for decades, and we finally have it. It's a great field with some great matchups, especially, when you're kind of projecting what the second round even might look like as well on a neutral site. But in round one here, we've got campus games and a lot of fun intrigue. But in this video in particular, what we're going to be focusing on are a couple different things. So we're going to be taking future bets right out the gate here in slide number one, essentially. And as we're kind of going down each game, we're going to have a bet in each game as well. But before we go ahead and jump into these futures, we got to make sure we're shouting out today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. And, you guys know, if you've been following me for a long time, I usually don't carry a lot of sponsors because I do want to believe in the product that I'm, presenting you guys with. And Underdog Fantasy is a fantastic platform. If you like NBA, NHL, NFL, college football, or college basketball, with that being in season as well here too, you can find angles on all of those sports that are very unique and tailored to this platform. And even if you like daily fantasy, you can find something as well on there. And make sure you are following me on Twitter/X at RobDFB, because we've been nailing some of these entries as of late. And if we don't, hit on an entry, we've been getting pretty darn close, which I think is a silver lining when you're looking at the multiplier payouts that you can potentially get here. But with all that being said, I am so excited to jump into these futures, and I say we go ahead and do it here. All right, the first four futures that we're going to be taking a look at here all originate from the same first round game. And that first round game also happens to be the first game of the college football playoff with Indiana and Notre Dame. And with these two teams, we're going to take both of them and their trajectory to the semifinals and to the championship game to both make the semifinals, to make the championship. And actually, I kind of lied. There's actually 6 futures in total here. Obviously, staggered unit sizing. We're not doing the same flat number across the board here, but we're going to be taking 3 different levels with both of these teams. And essentially what we're saying here is that Georgia in round 2, I do think that Georgia's a good team that can overcome an injury at quarterback. I don't even think that Carson Beck is that great of a player, but when you are going to a guy that is making his first career college start in a major game like this against potentially Notre Dame with a great defense, or potentially Indiana with a fiery offense where the Georgia offense is going to need to compete, I think, I'm going to be bullish on taking these longer shots. And for that reason, it gives us a really great angle to play 6 futures out the gate here. We're not really heavily invested in terms of units, but I think the upside is there 100%. All right, for our next future here, we are taking a look at 2 different teams on the same trajectory line as well. And we're going to be looking at Arizona State, and we're going to be looking at Clemson. And the reason why I picked these 2 teams is because I do feel like Clemson is alive in round 1. Do I think they're going to win in Austin? No, but do I think that there's a possibility that's above, 20%? I absolutely do think that possibility is there. And when you're getting an angle like plus 450 to just make the semifinals, and when you're looking at Arizona State, they drew Glendale. They drew an Arizona neutral site, quote unquote, game against the winner of Texas and Clemson. And for that reason, they're going to have home field advantage. I feel like they are a very good team that's being very overlooked because everybody wants to buy into Texas and the SEC on this side of the bracket and say that Arizona State didn't deserve a bye. I feel like they are just as good, if not better than Texas, and they have the home side, the home field on their side in that matchup. So I do want to take 2 separate stabs here with both Clemson and Arizona State, and I feel really good about it. I don't think either of these teams are good enough to win the national title, but to make it and advance, further than a lot of people think, I think we're extracting a ton of value with this futures market. All right, for our last future in the college football playoff, we are placing a one-off championship winner bet, and we are looking at the Ohio State Buckeyes. I know, they are coming off of a really bad loss as a 21-point favorite against Michigan, but what I would kind of push back on that with is that's one of those things that can sometimes fire you up and light a fire under the players and the coaching staff to make sure that, an embarrassing loss and, that turnaround happens. And for that reason, when you're looking at this matchup against Tennessee in round one, I feel like they're going to win this game pretty convincingly. I think just from an outright winner standpoint, them and Penn State are my most confident round one outright winners. And when you're also looking at round two, we saw Ohio State and Oregon play in Autzen, and what we saw was that it was a 1-point game. And Dan Lanning and Oregon kind of needed to manipulate the official rule set to win that game, because going into that final drive, it was a coin flip on which team was going to come out of there alive, and it just happened to be Oregon in that particular matchup. But it is so hard to beat a team twice in one season, especially when that team is the caliber of Ohio State. And if you're looking at the trajectory of Ohio State winning round one and then knocking off Oregon, I feel like that bottom side of the bracket is much weaker than the top side. And for that reason, I feel like Ohio State is going to have a clear line to the national championship. And I feel like at that point, too, they would be the best remaining team in the field, regardless of who made it that far. And for that reason, I say we take a stab here at plus 500 and take 3 units on the Ohio State Buckeyes to win the national championship. All right, so we talked through our futures for the college football playoff. Now it's time to talk about the sides and the totals that we're going to be taking here in round one. And we've got 4 of them for each game here in round one. And we're going to start off on Friday night with Indiana and Notre Dame. What a great matchup. In-state rivalry that hasn't really been played in some time. And if you don't think that Indiana fans are going to be showing up in this game with maybe 30% of the stadium looking crimson red, I feel like you haven't been following this fan base all season, because they are rabid and they are going to be willing to buy up any tickets that come available there. And for that reason, Indiana's getting 7.5 points. I feel like that's very high, and it's high just because of what happened in that Ohio State game. But man, I feel like there were some coachable or learnable things from watching that Ohio State game back to apply against Notre Dame here. And for that reason, I think they're going to be live, but we're getting the 7.5. I say we take the 7.5 points here for 3 units for our first bet of the college football playoff. All right, next up, we are heading out to Beaver Stadium, where we have the Penn State Nittany Lions taking on SMU, and this is a fantastic example of campus sites just being a fantastic addition to the college football playoff, because we're getting Beaver Stadium, we are getting a Penn State, fan base that's going to be so alive for this ball game, and we're getting elements at play against a team that hasn't really experienced a lot of cold weather during their season, and going back, decades during their seasons, they haven't really experienced this as well. And when you're looking at this matchup in particular, SMU has not faced a defense like Penn State all season long. And when you're looking at Penn State and their ground attack, I do feel like on both sides of the ball, Penn State's going to be able to control this game, and I can already hear, the Ole Miss and Alabama and South Carolina fans saying, hey, looking at SMU, looking them down double digits and being like, we wouldn't have got blown out like that. Well, I do feel like they're going to have, some fodder for that argument in this game, because I do think that Penn State is going to win big, and they're laying 8.5. I have zero problem with that for 3 units for our second bet here in the college football playoff. All right, next up, we are taking a look at a matchup between Clemson and Texas. And Texas is one of those teams that have kind of been relatively unproven of sorts, because their 2 losses on the season came to the same team. And in both of those games, I felt like Georgia was the better team. And outside of Georgia, they have an impressive win over Texas A&M on the road. I don't want to discredit that, but the next win that is kind of relevant, I would say, is, Michigan. in early season action, and then Vanderbilt. So this is a step up in terms of looking at the teams that are non-Georgia opponents. And Clemson, man, they can score with the best of them when everything is humming correctly. And I also feel like Clemson has a pretty impressive defense when, again, things are going well. I think a lot of it is unproven for Texas to be laying a number like this. And like we said in our futures market, picks, we are also going to be taking, Clemson just to win outright potential here as well. But we're going to keep the money line sort of deal more so in line with the futures market, and we're just going to take the 12 points here with Clemson for 3 units. Feel really good about it. Feel really good about them keeping it competitive throughout as a one-possession game, and hopefully this doesn't get backdoored, because I feel like that would be the one thing that could come back to bite us in this game. All right, for our final bet here in the first round of the college football playoff, we are taking a look at a matchup here between Ohio State and Tennessee, and obviously we have that future on Ohio State to win the whole dang thing, and I feel really great about it, but they are laying 7.5 points here. That's a pretty hefty number to be laying against a team that plays good defense like Tennessee. And Ohio State, even though they lost that game against Michigan, shout out to their defense, because they absolutely balled out despite being put in some awful positions by the offense of Ohio State, turning the ball over near their own end zone. And for that reason, when you're looking at two offenses that have had their issues in terms of just moving the football and putting up points, and you also have two defenses that have been great all season long, I feel like that's screaming under when you're looking at a total of 46.5. So let's go ahead and take that under here for 3 units for our final bet here in the college football playoff. All that being said, I really want to thank you guys for checking out today's video, and I want to give you guys a massive shout out for just following this content all season long. We obviously have a little bit more to go, and if you're wanting to follow my college basketball bets on a daily basis, or even some of my bowl game bets I'm going to have outside of the college football playoff, make sure that you're following me over on Twitter/X at RobDFB. That way you don't miss any of the bets that we're posting over there. But with all that being said, I will see you in a future video. Take it easy.